Morning, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Have you ever wondered how you can create better mid-level villains? I'm not talking about big bads. I'm talking about mid-level villains, the villains that your characters are going to face along on the adventure on smaller arcs. Do you often struggle with creating deep, meaningful mid-level villains that really get a rise out of your players and make the game super exciting? Well, today I'm going to share my method for how I make mid-level villains epic and amazing and engaging, and you're not going to miss it. Let's dive in. Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the GM Philosopher, and today we're going to talk about creating mid-level villains that will truly be epic, that your characters will love and love to hate, that will really get some engagement from them. So here's the problem with mid-level villains. Since they're not the big bad, they can sometimes lack the depth, the time build up. They can lack that story substance and structure that makes the big bad so epic. In some ways, it's more difficult to make a mid-level villain feel really important than it is a big bad. With that being said, it can absolutely be done, and I'm going to share my methods with you for how to make this happen. So step number one is make them interesting. I'm going to run through this exercise that I go through where I kind of take a villain and make it way more engaging, way more memorable. And let's take a big orc. Let's say he's just a 7-foot tall, massive orc. He has big tusks. He has a big belt with skulls on it, and he has a huge hammer that he calls Bone Crusher. And he has a single black ponytail on the top of his head with little bones and beads in it. And let's say he's got some, big shoulder armor, but otherwise he kind of goes bare chested into battle, kind of like a barbarian-esque type figure. Okay. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to think about what is going to set this villain apart from just like a normal villain, normal bad guy. What am I going to do to make this villain actually matter to the players? So first he needs a name. So the name we're going to give this villain is going to be Kazu the Foul. And he has a nickname. They call him the Flesh Ripper. And what he is he is a tribal chieftain who is known for winning battles with his orc raiding party. He is known for being especially brutal on the battlefield. He is known for actually having pretty decent battlefield tactics, for being just like a bandit raider, right? He's not like leading an empire. He's a relatively small time bandit raider, but we're going to say that this is a part of the world where a small bandit raiding party can do a lot of damage, and his raiding party is difficult to track down because they don't have one permanent home location. They travel around in the wilderness, in the marshes, in the mountains. They're known for going where few other people are willing to go. They're just sturdy, they're hardy, and they are tough, tough, tough. And Kazu is their leader because he is the toughest, the bloodiest, the boldest, the most fearsome of them all, standing, at least 6 inches taller than the next tallest orc. The reason they call him the Flesh Ripper is because after his battles, he likes to try to capture some of his enemies alive, and he likes to flay them on trees, on poles, on spikes, and he is in search of becoming an artist of the flay. He wants to set his minions to the task and watch as his enemies are exquisitely exterminated slowly and painfully before his eyes, and he derives great satisfaction from this. So, he is Kazu the Foul. They call him the Flesh Ripper, and he carries his hammer, Bone Crusher, which he uses in battle. And this gives us kind of the basis for our interesting mid-level villain. Okay, so right away, what we've done with this villain is we've given him more substance. He's not just a big orc named Kazu the Foul, who's a raiding chieftain, right? We've given him a little bit more depth. He has this nickname. He has this hammer. Maybe it's even a magic item, and it's legendary for just smashing bones. And we've also given him kind of like something that has preceded him, like a reputation and something he's known for. And so this gives him a little bit more depth. Okay, so we can see that he's kind of turning out to be a bit more interesting than just, oh, he's a big orc. He's charging at you, right? So right away, we've accomplished the make him more interesting part. Now, my next step is to make him believable, okay? So how do you make them believable? So the way you make a villain believable in D&D, and this is kind of interesting, you have to make them believable just in a general sense. Like if you try to say something really zany, or you try to propose a villain that just doesn't really make thematic sense, or, for example, if I was playing high fantasy and the party was going out into the wilderness, to hunt a villain, or they came across a villain or something, and I said, the villain that you hear about in this region, his name is Zoomer, and he is a 1989 Chevrolet Corvette. Right? This is this is not believable. This immediately destroys all immersion. So you want to make the villain believable, but this goes even more deep than just something like that. Crazy. How you make a villain believable is you use the existing structure of the story and the existing world state to support this villain. So, for example, I would want to make sure to place Kazu the Fowl in a setting where he would be Kazu the Fowl and where he would have a reason to be this person. And to do this, I may have to go back in time a little bit in my story and think about his past. How did he become Kazu the Fowl? Well, in my thinking, he grew up in a big family with a bunch of boys. He was one of the youngest. He was the second youngest, and all of the other boys would just constantly beat him up. And I think his father was perhaps even the war chief, but his father believed that the strong rise to the top and the weak settle at the bottom or perish. And it is actually good for the weakest to perish because then they won't hold back the tribe. And so I believe that Kazu, as the second youngest, maybe was friends with the youngest and wanted to protect the youngest, who was a bit of a runt. On a side note, I believe that his younger brother, maybe because he was smaller and because he was a runt, but maybe he was interested in magic and they grew up together, and eventually the younger brother became his shaman. And now he has this right hand man who is his brother, who is a shaman who uses like battlefield voodoo, dark blood magic. Maybe he drains the blood from the flay victims to fuel terrible spells that they use during combat. And so this is kind of fun. But he's perhaps maimed because the older brothers one time got a hold of him and broke his legs. So maybe he has to walk with like crutches, or he's always on his mount, and he is so maimed from his childhood trauma. And that's part of the reason that Kazul decided to launch a campaign of vengeance and to become this fearsome protector of him, but also going on the attack against his older brothers. Anyway, just some ideas I had while I was fleshing this out. This is just me, riffing off the cuff. And his older brothers would just pummel him and beat him up. But as they grew, he was able to survive, and he was able to get a bit bigger and a bit tougher. And he grew this just like meanness and this ferocity. And one by one, he started taking out his brothers in combat in little ways. He was a little more sneaky, a little more devious than his brothers. His brothers were just basically empty-headed, body-crushing destruction machines. But he learned that he had to be a little bit manipulative. Like, for example, he would draw one of his brothers into a duel, and he would come to the duel prepared with the perfect weapon to counter his brother. Perhaps he chose to fight the brothers when they were exhausted, and he kind of made it look like it was honorable on his side. And doing this, he was able to systematically take them all out and become the next in line to rule the tribe as the chief. Maybe there are rumors that he even took out his father at the later stages of his life to assume the mantle of the warrior, the chieftain, the tribal warrior leader of this tribe, right? So this fits with a setting where there isn't much civilization. This isn't around a major city. If it was, they would have sent the army out to deal with Kazu. No. He stays too far away. He's in the mountains. He's in the swamp, right? This makes it believable. It would not be believable for Kazu to be living under the bridge right outside the big city, where the army could just come out and get him, where the spellcasters could come get him, because these are the things that he would be vulnerable to. A larger force that could surround him, that could use superior weapons and tactics, or magic, because maybe his bandit raiding party uses only a very little bit of magic. They don't have any high-level wizards or anything like that. So to me, this makes it believable if he's running around in the mountains and the swamps, out in the outer forest, away from civilization. This makes it believable. So you want to make it believable. And this is a really important thing. And the next part is you want to use rumors to set it up. So when I'm creating a mid-level villain, what I want to do is I want to go back before I ever plan for the players to encounter this villain. So let's say like 4 sessions before I plan for the players to even cross paths with this person, I'm going to start putting seeds of rumors in. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm setting them up for the eventuality of them coming across him, and helps to build anticipation. And this makes them so much more memorable and epic. So, maybe they're traveling through the countryside and they get to the big city. And in the city, they say, "You're not traveling west, are you? Kazu dwells in the west. His bandits are the worst. They raid, they flay their prisoners. He has a hammer called Bone Crusher. You can't travel west. And if you do, you have to stay low, and you cannot be discovered by Kazu's scouts, because if they discover you, you will be goners, right?" So it's like, you want these rumors to start in, and then that's it. Maybe they just hear a rumor, and that's all that happens the whole session. And then the next session, they hear another rumor. "Did you hear there was another raid to the west, 50 miles from the city?" Right? So that you're hearing these things, and then maybe in the session 3, they hear another rumor. "Did you see, or did you hear, on the west small village 40 miles away? They say that a village was ransacked, burned. The flag of Kazu, his foul hammer, emblazoned black against a dark green background. This is his banner, was seen above the village. He has taken the village and he's residing there, but it won't be long. They say if anyone wants to take him out, they have to do it now, but I don't know who would be brave enough." Right? So we're putting rumors in here, and that's it. These are reaching the player's ears, but they're not getting attacked right now. They're not getting anything like that, unless you want to fit some stuff like that in. But what I'm saying is, using rumors to lead up to it makes it way more memorable. And that leads us to the next point, which is to make it personal. Some of the best, most epic mid-level villains I've ever run were villains that made it personal. So let's just say, for example, that your players are, for some, whatever reason, you've done your you've done your good GM work, you've done your good plot work, you've engaged interest, you've hooked them in, and for some reason they're going to go after Kazu, or they're going to try to protect someone from Kazu. Maybe they're going to go with a caravan, maybe they're hired as guards, or whatever the case is. You do not want their first encounter with Kazu or Kazu's men to be about them. You don't even want it to be about a final showdown, anything like that. You want to tease it, because remember, this is a mid-level villain. This isn't a one-session villain. There can be like one-session villains. I'm talking about mid-level villains who are villains of an arc. So for me, this will be maybe like a 5 to 10 session arc, where there's one villain and you're setting them up for that arc, the conclusion of that arc. So maybe it's like there's this caravan arc. They have to protect the caravan, and then the raiders are led by Kazu, and that's who they're afraid of. So what I'm going to do is, during the one night, the caravan gets attacked. Your players, they do a great job. They defend the caravan. They defend it against several powerful orc warriors, but these warriors are not like super powerful. And this attack basically fails because the players defeat the invaders, the attackers, and they realize that the raiders retreat, realizing that they have faced such staunch resistance, but not before a personal wound is inflicted. So maybe a key NPC is badly wounded by one of the attackers. Maybe a key NPC that the players love, it gets kidnapped. Maybe a pet gets kidnapped that they love very much. Maybe the little boy, maybe you set it up at the beginning of the caravan to where this little girl really loves the players, and she's like buddying up to them and wants to be an adventurer, and she even has a little bit of magic, and she's a cool person, and then she gets swiped by the raiders during the attack because the players are too busy fighting to like defend her, and the mom comes up screaming and crying, saying, "Will you save her?" So you're making it personal, and you're making it so that the players have personal emotional stock in the story, and that's how you tie them closer to that villain. This really creates an emotional impact where players are going to want to deal with this villain instead of questioning whether or not it's even worth pursuing the plot, right? So that's another thing I do, make it personal. And then my next tip is court your players. Now, here's how I do this. When I say court your players, I mean I want to tease the end fight with them, but I don't want to give it to them right away. So what's going to happen is, maybe the first time they encounter these raiders, they fight just a few raiders. Kazu isn't even there. Turns out this was just a little test run. Now, 3 nights later, another attack comes. This time, the orcs are riding wargs and they're throwing torches. It's a much more brutal attack. The players fight, and it's much more dangerous. Maybe they have a much harder fight on their hands. And you keep reiterating how the wargs, like upon the words, the riders, they're carrying the banners, and so they hear the war horns of the tribe. Like, so this is like they're getting a deeper sense of conflict with this enemy, and maybe all the raiders are even chanting Kazu, Kazu, and they fight and they kind of hit, but then they run. The fight isn't over. They've hit, they tested the defenses again. The defenses proved worthy, so they backed out and took off. And this is Kazu's tactics, maybe. Okay, now I'm courting them. It's like a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, and they hit and they pull back. They hit and they pull back. We're deepening the conflict, deepening the feeling of animosity toward this villain, deepening the hatred for this villain, and the fact that he's becoming a big problem, but we're not giving in to the final boss fight yet. We are holding off on this. Maybe the third time when they attack, they see Kazu in the distance. And while maybe you choose the moment when they're peak fighting, defending their wagon or whatever, and they're fighting it's a very, very tough fight, the toughest one so far. In the distance, they see Kazu fight the caravan chieftain, and just with one mighty swing of his hammer, he takes off the caravan leader's head, and it rolls across. And then Kazu looks over at the party members, and he points his hammer, and he grins, and then he turns around and walks into the mist or the smoke, right? And then he calls off his bandit raiders, and they retreat again. They take prisoners. This time they capture some cargo. The players realize it's getting tighter and tighter, right? But see, we're courting the players here. We're courting them, trying to get that tension built way up for that final fight to make it way more intense. And finally, we want to make the villain detestable. Now, I'm assuming that you are running, some kind of good campaign. I'm kind of putting this video together sort of like if you're running a good group of players versus evil villains. This can be done in either way. You could have evil villains or evil players who are trying to face like a good paladin or an angelic being or something like that. And so these concepts can work in reverse too. But you want to make the mid-level villain detestable. Now, what I would do in this situation is, like, in the session, what I would do is I would find a way to end the session before the boss fight on a cliffhanger where, the players have seen a lot of detestable things happen. Kazu's men have just smashed caravan, travelers. Like, these people are helpless. These people are not capable of defending themselves. The players alone are keeping the orcs at bay, right? And but I'm going to have it maybe set it up so that little girl who got captured, they come across, they're moving the caravan across the trail, and in the middle of the road on a spike, there is the girl flayed in Kazu's style with his banner stretched out above her. And then maybe he left a note to the player characters. It's like, a gift from me, the perfect flaying, right? So this is, if your players liked this NPC, they're going to be, feeling that rage, that anger, like that thirst for revenge. They're like, this guy has gone too far. We have to stop him. So you want to make the villain detestable, and you want to kind of like, toss that at the players, toss out these little detestable things that goad them into wanting the big fight. And this helps to build that like emotional tension. It's like a movie, right? It's like kind of like a Hollywood movie. And then, of course, you want to lead into setting up the big fight, the face-off at the conclusion of the arc, the big conflict against the villain. And I like to try to do this in creative ways. I like to try to set these types of things up so that it is a good, proper face-off. I like to do a lot of smack talking. I want the big bad. Actually, all through this process, I haven't mentioned this yet, but all through this process, as often as I can, I want that big bad. When I say big bad, I mean the big mid-level villain. I want that mid-level villain talking smack to these players. They're going to be jabbing at them. They're going to be insulting them, insulting their honor. Maybe Kazu finds one of the player characters worthy, like a worthy opponent, but then the others he sees as being weak. So he'll take jabs at them, and he'll be like, if it weren't for him, you all would be gone. Maybe he's like, you are cowards. You travel with this caravan. You protect these poor, helpless people, but you are poor and helpless. Like he's just a bad guy, and he's just saying things to rile up the players because he knows that if he can get them mad, he can gain the advantage, right? So when he sets up this big fight, I'm going to have him talking smack, saying kind of like epic things, kind of epic things that align with his character and things that align with his nature as a villain, that align with his nature as a believable character in the setting, right? So I'm going to really work on that dialogue, and I'm going to have that be a part of the fight, and I'm going to make the fight right? Epic by making it balanced, making it very emotionally charged, right? And I'm going to do this by trying to also incorporate things that player characters might lose. Maybe put other NPCs in danger. Maybe a couple more got captured. Maybe they know that maybe he points and he's got a whole like corral circle of people he's captured from the caravan. And he says, for every one of you who fails to defeat me, I shall flail one of them. Right. So it's like, or flay one of them. Right. So it's like he puts the stakes on it. He's like, if you run, I shall flay them all. He's like, this is where it ends right here. He's just like talking big. So you want to set up that big fight to be kind of epic, to be kind of ultimate. And then, of course, let your players be creative and navigate it. Another thing that can really help with this is if you kind of struggle with plot arcs, you might need to throw some plot arcs in there. I have a book called The Ultimate Plot Randomizer. You can download this when you sign up for my mail list. Link is in the description. This ebook comes free in your first email. You can download it for free. Random roll plot arcs, hooks, conflicts, and conclusions, and wild wacky stuff. You can literally random roll plot arcs on the fly so that if you do run into a situation where you're quite not sure where to go with it, you can random roll a plot arc, apply it to your mid-level villain, do some creative magic, and boom, you have plot arcs for days, infinite number, and you can use them whenever you need to on the fly. You can print this out, put it with your stuff. It's pretty awesome. I also want to encourage you to join my Discord. You can jump in there and talk about your villains, do a little brainstorming with other people. Our Discord now is up to over 100 members, and we're in there playing games, running games, people in there looking for GMs that want to run games, sharing artwork, sharing music, all kinds of cool stuff. So if you like Discord, you'll definitely want to stop by and hang out with us. It'd be awesome. And hey, that's going to conclude my take on creating memorable mid-level D&D villains. I hope this has been useful to you. I hope that you have found this fun. I found this a lot of fun. I love creating villains, so this is a lot of fun for me. Thank you for watching another one of my videos. I'm here almost every day creating videos about the best game in the world, D&D. So I will see you awesome people on the next one.